She's from South Sudan. She's going to give us an inside story of who she is, how the experience was. And not only that about her, but she's also a co-founder of NyaEden Foundation. This foundation is something that is changing lives. It's something that is bringing differences and helping young girls back home in South Sudan and Ethiopia, Gambela region as well. So I'm going to introduce her to you guys. Her name is Biel. This girl is phenomenal. We're so proud of her, and I'm so happy to bring her on today so that all the people in the diaspora can go ahead and hear her story. So Biel, how are you?
Thanks for having me on. Like I said, it's kind of like a full circle for both you and I, because we know each other personally,
Yes.
and we happen to have the same name. So Mal is the shorter version of Nyamal. We can transform that name in so many ways. So like Nyamal said, my name is Nyamal. I go by Mal, Biel, and I'm one of the co-founders of the NyaEden Foundation. And we aim to empower women through education, peace building, conflict resolution, and the ultimate goal is self-sufficiency. So we did our first trip to Gambela, Ethiopia in November, December of 2019. And that's also was a joint trip where I also was able to present my degree to family members that have not seen me in 27 years, especially my grandfather.
So that happened around the same time when you were taking that trip.
Yes.
Wow.
So it was, it's a bad analogy, but, usually kill two birds with one stone type of thing. It's a bad analogy, I know. But that happened at the same time, so it was a lot happening at once. Between going to deliver these menstrual pads to the young girls, and then trying to squeeze in time to see family. It was just a lot to process. I'm still processing it now, as being back here in the U.S.
And most people take trips like 3 months back home. How long did you have to do all of this?
So what had happened was,
I like how you start that.
Well, we live in the U.S. and I have a job. Even though I have a nonprofit, I'm building this nonprofit, so we don't have a lot of funding yet. So all of the funding that we get from our donors is going directly to programming. And so I was only able to get a month off from work. So all of this stuff happened in 3 weeks, and then I had to go to Geneva for the Global Refugee Conference. I spoke there. So I came back to the U.S. for like 2 days and then went to Geneva in engagement.
You went back overseas, that 14-hour long flight.
Yeah.
I would have been gone by then, because I know how that is like, traveling all the way from D.C. or wherever you end up leaving, just to do that whole mission to go all the way to Africa and things like that. So what was the experience like there? How was we'll start with NyaEden Foundation. Okay. So what is the experience like with the girls, the children that you are helping over there, and what you're presenting to them, what you're bringing to them?
So this has been a 2 years in the making trip. We got sponsored by Days for Girls. Days for Girls is an international organization that is in over 100 countries in the world, 6 continents, if not all 7 of them. And so we wrote to them. Essentially, we reached out to them and said, hey, this is our story, and we know that when it comes to migration, when it comes to movement, people don't think about what we have to go through as women when it comes time for that time of the month. Even speaking about it, people calling it that time of the month. It's menstruation. It's a period.
Yeah.
So it needs to be normalized. So people don't talk about it. And
I know it's like a taboo in our country.
Yeah. It's a taboo.
And it's sad too, because everybody's in the dark with it.
Yeah. So we said, for me, it was a personal thing. I went back in 2014 to Gambela to take my grandmother back. And so I went as an American woman. I had my tampons, I had my pads and Ziploc bags. And then when I saw my cousins and some other young women in the camps, I'm like, what do you guys use when you get your menstrual cycle?
Oh, yeah.
And they were like, well, if we have leftover money from relatives in the diaspora that have sent us money, then we buy those supplies.
Yeah.
And if we don't, then we just use rags. And so for me, it was very disheartening. So when I came back to the U.S., I dealt with survivor guilt.
Wow.
And a lot of us don't talk about mental health, but survivor guilt for a lot of us in the diaspora, a lot of us deal with it. You know, especially when you go home the first time and really see the conditions.
Yeah.
And then my other co-founder, Biel, and I started brainstorming, how can we be of help? Because being here, it's great. We have our basic needs met, and some of us are living a little bit better, even though
we don't even really think about it either, because everything's there.
How can we be of help?
Yeah.
And so that's how the NyaEden Foundation was born, and then we've been doing a lot of advocacy work in terms of this gender issues, and then also when it comes to conflict resolution and peace building, because especially in South Sudan right now, everybody knows about, you know, everybody in the African continent were so happy with our independence. But then when we went into war in 2013, of course, that was, the women are the ones suffering. And so when the peace process was started in 2016, even now, a lot of the women's voices are not there. And that's problematic. So my academic background is in international peace and conflict resolution. So I speak about, it's the men that start the war, the women are the ones that suffer, and yet when it comes time for peace building, they are missing at the table.
We're so grateful to have you.
Let's say in the context of South Sudan, if you put a Nuer woman, a Shuluk woman, a Denka woman, an Equatorian, they will be more than likely to agree on a solution faster, because they're the one losing husbands, sons, daughters, and things of that nature, where men are, not every man either, it's the elites that are making sure that they don't lose power, they don't lose some of that privilege, if you call it. They don't lose the privilege. So it's just a matter of just empowering. So that's how the NyaEden Foundation was born, and the work that we're doing, it's in advocacy, and now we're moving into programming with doing these menstrual pads. So when I went to Ethiopia, I actually went with one of our member. She is a nurse. Her name is Mana Joak. So she did our reproductive health education. So we just did not go to deliver these pads and just kind of leave them there. You have to also educate people so that it's a ripple effect.
So what were their stories like?
In terms of the girls, the young women, it was unexplainable, because
that's what I had a hard time with, you know, because these are the kind of things you can't just say.
No, you can't say, you have to experience it. And for me, one of the memorable moment, one of the moments that's going to stay with me, and of course, I literally just came from a conversation about a book that's entitled Me and the White Supremacists, and how in the NGO world, there's the white savior complex that we have to interrupt. So for me, I'm very intentional, and even the way that I present myself in the spaces that I'm in, I'm very intentional. So when we went to 3 sites, we went to a boarding school, we went to a school in the refugee camps, one of the camps, and then we also deliver some products to the women in the prison, because that is something that is not even thought about either. It's an afterthought. So in the boarding school that we went to, it's of course we do know that the Gambela region actually have its own conflicts in terms of the ethnic groups there. So this boarding school that we went to had all of the young girls from all of the ethnic groups in Gambela in the same school, being educated together and building those relationships between those communities through the young women.
Is it very different to like present this foundation in Gambela and also in South Sudan? Was it a little difficult? Or was
we
it the same
did not reach
both?
all the way to South Sudan because the conflict is still current and our resources were not that much. So we stayed in Gambela, and then of course Ethiopia is one of the biggest, next to Uganda, is one of the biggest countries that's serving the South Sudanese refugees.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And in terms of conflict resolution as well, host communities and resettled communities often have conflict where the host communities feel that the refugees are the one getting everything and we're being neglected if we're talking about developing nations. So our strategy was we'll divide whatever small amount we have between the refugees and the host communities.
So tell us a little bit, like, what did you see in the refugee? What was the lifestyle like there in like Kokuma camp or like southern Ethiopia or Kobo, all those other camps there in South Sudan and also in Ethiopia? What was the lifestyle like there? What was for women?
Well, it's like any of us. It's like, it's basically living. It's life. You have to live there until you either go back to your country or you get resettled to a third country. People are living their lives. They're surviving. They're in survival. They're trying to better themselves. We met with about over 200 girls, 200 young women that were in school. Wow. And the oldest student was a 39-year-old woman. She was in the 11th grade. Wow. And
that's a lot of girls.
If I could be in these classes and motivate these young women to get educated, then their circumstances will change. And one of the things that I talk to them about is, of course, me coming from the West. My partner and I that went together. She's a nurse. She presented herself. She's like, I'm a nurse. I went to school. And talking about norms, cultural norms of African women, young girls being married at an early age because of bride price and things of that nature. And then also feeling pressure also from your own fear of maybe you choosing to be educated and not getting married at an early age. And
I was going to come to that too.
So we basically talk about ending early child marriages as well, as much as the reproductive health and as much as just choosing education, because once you're educated, you'll be able to interrupt a lot of cycles in your family, in your community, your country, and ultimately being a global citizen.
And do you think this foundation is creating those changes and is progressing as far as girls going to school and going to college and becoming independent on their own without having to go into an early marriage just because of a menstrual?
It's changing a little bit, but it's not as rapid. You have to realize that we come from communities and we come from traditions that are still very hard to break out of.
Yes, I totally agree with that.
But we were very hopeful with what we saw. Young women are choosing to take their own future into their own hand, per se.
Wow. No, that's a big change. That's a good change.
A lot of the young women we spoke for wanted to. One in particular was 36. She had 6 children, and she was in the 9th grade. And so when she passed the 8th grade, her husband was like, "I'm very proud of you. I want you to continue with your education, so I'm going to help out in the house a little bit more." And she wanted to become a midwife because that's a problem she saw in the community. That when these young girls or these women are having children, a simple, easy solution that could be fixed and could be avoided often isn't. And the child ends up losing his or her life, or the mother ends up losing, her life in the process of it. So she wants to be that change.
Wow.
She just made resources.
I know in our culture is having children is almost like a priority. Or maybe I wouldn't say priority, but it's because of, the lifestyle and the culture we grew up in and having children. Do you think that part of the culture is changing because women are starting to realize that, I can be independent or I can just go to school and, because it takes the little change like that to have a menstrual in order to be able to do your free will things, go swimming, go hang out with your friends, or go to the mall. Like the period wouldn't stop you from doing anything.
No, Well, it's you have to think. So even the question, actually, you're asking it from a Western perspective. Listening to you, you're asking that question from a Western perspective, and even saying that these women want to be independent and so forth. In terms of independence, African women have always been independent, but it's just been in the context of a community, in a context of a family. It's not this Western independence of I must leave the community and go out there and fetch
You can say it way better than I can. Do that again. Yes, independency over here.
So we as African women have always been independent. It's just in the context of community, because we are still indigenous people and still believe in the concept of I am because we are. So in terms of the menstrual cycle thing, is basically is the young women that are going to school that do not have the resources, that are like, this is going to be able to help me to go to school. So when we were talking to one of the principal in the camp school that we went to, he was concerned because some of his students would miss a week, and he was like, did they drop out? Then they would just consider them dropouts. And he implemented almost like a case management program where he would have one of the counselors go see this student, and then they would find out that, oh, I didn't come to school that week because I had my period. And so that was one of the things that the women were really happy about, and particularly
and most of them too, they don't like to come out or be close to someone else when they're going through that menstrual cycle as well.
Well, how can you come out when you're bleeding? You're bleeding, and you just have to sit at home and make sure you don't stain the clothes that you have. So, but one of the things that this young particular woman said to me was, she didn't even know that we had, they call them modesties. Even in the conversation, it's still very tabooed. So she said, well, we're lacking modesties. And Mana and I had to look at ourselves like, what are modesties? And so she said, well, when it's that time of the month, it's very difficult for a lot of us to actually be engaged citizens, because we have to hide. Isolated, we don't have the products. So when we told them that we had these products, they were so happy. And in one of the interviews that she stated, and she was speaking in Noor. And it really touched me, because I'm like, this is deeper than deep. She said, now I can be a human among humans. I'm just it's not the direct translation in English doesn't work. But in Noor, she said,
that's deep.
So, and that was speaking to her dignity. She can now have dignity and be among her peers, or even if going into the community while she has her period, she's not going to worry that it's going to leak, or she can't go out and do something because she doesn't have the products. She has to be at home. So for me, I was like, wow. And that's when I realized that what we're doing is bigger than us. And also when they were welcoming us, one thing that she said that is, you came back and you look like me. And that's speaking to the white savior complex, that it's always white women, white people that are going back to
that Africa. Are coming and doing all the charity and all that.
Exactly. And also too, in terms of the young women that we help that speak the Noor language, because both Mana and I speak Noor, we were able to communicate with them in our language. And they were just like, this is unbelievable.
Wow. So it's a big change for them too, to know that we have our own children coming back and giving back to the community and making change. And that's also changing their perspective, that it's not just the white woman or the white man that is now bringing all of these to save our lives, but our children are returning back home.
And so with the NyaEden Foundation, actually, we're just starting in Ethiopia, because in South Sudan, because that's what we know and where we know. And so we're very much open to other collaborations. We want to go to other African countries, because at the end of the day, both Kut and I are Pan-Africans, and we're global citizens.
Yeah.
For me, as long as we're in the African continent and we're helping our own, it doesn't matter where it is. As long as I'm helping an African woman and she can thrive and disrupt the narrative
Yes.
is being shown that we're helpless or we're this or we're that. It's like, no, we're the original women, you know?
Yeah. Wow. I'm very proud of you. I am so proud of you.